So far in this chapter, we've focused mostly on motivation, but it also covers emotions, and I want to look at how emotions interact with motivation. I'm going to be taking this information that I'm sharing with you from the book Change Your Brain, Change Your Life by Daniel Amen, and it shows the pages that it's from, dealing mostly with the limbic system. He's one of them that we showed a video of earlier on in the semester that talked about brain scans, and so his material is based on brain scans. It's scientifically sound material, and therefore what he's sharing in here is really helpful for what we're talking about. Thoughts have physical consequences. If you think about things that happen to you, things that you're anticipating happening to you, there's a physical effect on your brain, a physical effect on your body, the chemicals that they bring out. Every time you have a thought, your brain releases chemicals. And that makes sense. If you're afraid, you get butterflies in your stomach. Those are chemicals that are flowing through you. The foods we eat release chemicals. The liquids we ingest involve chemicals. But the thoughts that we have also release chemicals, and chemicals then affect our emotions. If you have mad, unkind, sad, cranky thoughts, they give you bad feelings. If you have good, hopeful, happy thoughts, they give you good feelings. Sometimes we think that the feelings, the events that happen to us cause these thoughts, but a lot of times you can look at it the other way around. If you're having these kinds of thoughts, it causes the release of certain chemicals that then affect how your body feels. So your body is actually reacting to every thought that you have. And that's a scary thought, but a powerful thought, depending on how you look at it. If you just let your mind flow and let the thoughts happen without ever taking hold of them and deciding what you're going to think about, you don't really have the control of how your body feels. But if you choose to decide what you're going to do with your thoughts, it gives control back to you on how your body feels and how you react and how your emotions then come into play. So if you can think about good things, you'll end up feeling better. And you have to remember, you don't have to believe every thought that goes through your head. Just because a thought flows through your mind, you can take that thought, you can hold on to it, and you can decide if it's actually a good thought, a bad thought, if it's true, if it's false. You don't have to just believe it just because it comes in your mind. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we want to look at how you can train your thoughts to be more positive and hopeful, rather than just living with the thoughts that automatically come to you. Research has shown that positive emotions, especially a sense of awe, can actually reduce inflammation in your body that can affect your health. Now that sense of awe, that comes in the kind of a spirituality range. If you believe in God, it fits in there, a sense of awe with who God is and what He's done. But even if you don't believe in God, you can have that sense of awe as you look at nature, as the trees change colors, as you're by a river or an ocean, as you're out in nature walking around, as you see pictures even of mountains and things like that, or your pets at home and the love that you feel, that sense of awe that you have. When you focus on those kinds of things, that has a positive effect on your emotions and on your health overall. Dr. Amen talks about ANTs, automatic negative thoughts. These are things that come to us that if we don't pay attention to, have a real negative effect on us. And what we're going to do is just look at 9 of these ants that he points out. And you can see as you're looking through them which ones tend to affect you more. Some of us will flow towards one, some will flow toward the other, but kind of pay attention to which ones tend to bother you so you can look at how to change those things. So the first one is all or nothing thinking. If you look at a situation, it's either all good or it's all bad. Bad things happen to everybody, but it doesn't mean everything about that situation is bad. Some people call it black and white thinking. If I don't get a job, then that's just terrible and I'll never get a job, is kind of the thought process, as opposed to, well, I didn't get this job, but maybe there's a good one around the corner for me, and that's why I didn't get this one. So be careful of that all or nothing thinking, that either if someone's mean to you, that means they're always mean. It might just mean that they're having a bad day today. So if you find yourself in that process, kind of pay attention to that. The next one is always thinking. So if you find yourself using words like always, never, no one, that leads to a negative thinking pattern. Again, it's lumping future situations in based on past situations. And it's also seeing that if something is bad, it's never ever going to get good. And it's even dangerous the other way if it's always good. If you're with a person, you just think they're the most wonderful person in the world and they can never do anything wrong, that's dangerous too, because there are times when they will do things wrong. And then that thought process sets you up for problems in the future. It sets them up to have to live up to those expectations of being perfect, but it sets you up that if they ever don't, you're extremely disappointed, and then you jump into the thought that if they're bad here, maybe they really always were and I didn't know it, and you really can't see them for who they are as a person. It's really hard to love somebody or care for somebody if you have this always kind of thinking going on. Focusing on the negative is another automatic negative thought that can happen, where we get in a habit of just looking at everything that's in front of us, everything that happened today, and then picking out only the negative things that happened and dwelling on those instead of looking at everything and picking out the positive things that happened either in that situation or throughout the day. And some people can get into this pattern of always focusing on the negative. And so it's important to remember we have to see life for what it is. It's not black and white. There are positive things that you can also dwell on. You can choose what you're going to think about. Fortune telling. Predicting the worst possible outcome for a situation, assuming that you know, if I apply for this job, I'm not going to get it anyway. If I take that class, I'm just going to fail. If I ask that person out on a date, they're just going to say no. You don't know the future. And you don't also know, the argument is that it's going to turn out well, but if you're not sure either way, you might as well focus on the positive potential that this could turn out well for me and go ahead and give it a try, rather than always assuming you know the future and focusing on the negative. Because remember, negative thoughts end up releasing negative chemicals that affect our body in negative ways. And so that ends up slowing us down and we choose not to try things, and then we kind of have that self-fulfilling prophecy that they talk about. Mind reading is the next one. Assuming that you know what other people are thinking. Let's say you walk in a room and you see somebody that you like. As soon as you walk in, they have a thought that they left their lights on, so they turn around and walk out of the room. It has nothing to do with you. But you're assuming, if you're mind reading, that you know what they're doing, and you're thinking that they saw you walk in the room and they left because they don't like you. And then you go down this whole trail of, they don't like me, there's something wrong, I must have made them mad. And it actually had nothing to do with you. But because you're assuming you know what they're thinking, you go down a path that leads you to a lot of pain for nothing. So mind reading, if you find yourself always thinking that you know what other people are thinking, you might need to step back and check the facts on the situation. Thinking with your feelings. What that means is putting feelings before your thoughts. When you have negative feelings about a situation, assuming that they must be true. Because I feel like I'll fail in this if I try it, that must be true. Because I feel like you're mad at me, you must be mad at me. It's putting your feelings above your logical thoughts and deciding that if it's what I feel, then therefore it's true. So this also is a trap. It gets us away from actually processing and logically thinking, or even just looking into the facts to find out if it's true. So this is another one of them that can cause problems. And then the last three, guilt beatings. If you find yourself feeling guilty all the time, using words like should, must, ought, have to, those kind of things are motivators, but they motivate us in a negative way, and it leaves you living under a cloud of guilt and shame and doing things just because you ought to do them, because you have to do them, because if you don't do them, you'll get in trouble. Instead, if you replace it with, is this helpful to me? Is it not helpful to me? Rather than, is it good? Is it bad? Or it would be, it would help meet my goals if I did this, rather than I have to do this. If you change the way you say things, it can change your motivation for wanting to do it. Let's say you have a test coming up, and if you look at, I have to study for this test, it becomes a burden. But if you change your words and say, if I study for this test, that will help my grade, and if I help my grade, that will help me achieve my goals better, then the studying for the test becomes more of a desire to meet an outcome rather than this heavy burden and this guilty feeling on your back, on your shoulders, weighing you down. So it's just restating something and accomplishing the same goal, but you accomplish it with a whole different motivation. Labeling. Now that's either labeling yourself or other people. You can label yourself as dumb, as stupid, as clumsy, as someone who always ends up failing and doing things that get in their own way. A lot of times we grow up with these labels. We've been named by other people over time that that's not for the likes of me. No matter how hard I try, I always fail. And those are things that can be very damaging to us because we live as if they're true. So you need to really be careful about the labels that you put on yourself and the names that you give yourself or that other people have given you that you accept. You want to think through what those are and decide if you really need to change some of those labels to something more positive, that I'm the kind of person that keeps pushing through until it happens. I'm the kind of person that even if I fail, I learn from those failures and then I move on and try again. So it's a whole different way of labeling yourself or naming yourself. And the last one is blaming. And he says this is the most poisonous one. It's transferring the blame for things, negative situations, onto somebody else. It's your fault that this happened. The reason I failed the test is because the teacher made the questions tricky, or the reason I didn't get on the team is because the coach doesn't like me. All these kind of things that put the blame on somebody else. The problem with that is if everything that happens to me is somebody else's problem or somebody else's fault, then I'm really a victim to circumstances and there's not much I can do to make my life better. But if I take responsibility for what I can do, then that empowers me to actually be able to change and to make my life better. So instead of saying I didn't make the team because the coach doesn't like me, I can say, I didn't make the team, and I bet if I practice harder on these skills, when I try out next time, I'll make it. I didn't do well on the test, but I see that the reason is I didn't study exactly what he was looking for, and he gave me a list of things. I'm going to make sure I use that study guide to study what's on the next test so that I can review, or I'm going to use the study skills I've learned to learn more. So I'm not necessarily blaming myself, but I'm just taking responsibility for the outcomes of my life, which can then motivate me to try harder rather than giving up because it's all out of my control. So we're going to practice this a little bit. If there's the thought that there's nothing that can be done, I'm in a situation, things are bad, it needs to change, but I'm feeling like I'm believing there's nothing that can be done. Which of these might that be fitting into? And if you think about it, that will come into that all or nothing thinking. That it's either good or it's bad. And if things are bad, forget it. It's all bad. There's nothing that can be done about it. Let's look at another one. No one will ever want to date me. If you have this kind of a feeling, what is that tying in with of those ants that we looked at? Well, one of them could be that, again, that all or nothing feeling. That either you're a person that everybody loves and everybody wants to be around, or you're a reject that nobody could love and nobody wants to be around. And that's just not true. We're all somewhere in the middle there. And we can work toward finding people that we love and care about, finding people that we want to be around, and people that want to be around us. And we can find friends, and we can find people to date. Another one, the boss doesn't like me. My job isn't going well. I got a bad performance evaluation. The boss doesn't like me. My job's just always going to be this way. Well, that can be a mind reading sort of a thing where I just assume that they don't like me. Maybe they're kind of a cold person. Maybe they're having a bad day, but I'm assuming they don't like me. And I can find out if they do like me by either talking with them, by breaking the ice with them, by getting to know them, letting them get to know me a little better. There might be some ways, some things that I can do if I change my thought from mind reading to saying, I don't like the way that they're treating me, so what I'm going to do is try and get them to like me. I have the ability to change people's perspectives of me, so then I can work through this and I can build a friendship with them. And I'll get them to change their behaviors toward me by drawing them in, rather than just assuming I know what they're thinking. I'm stupid. Well, that would be that labeling thing, the idea that this is just who I am, it will never change. It's not my fault. Obviously, that's a blaming one. It's somebody else's fault for what's happened to me. There's a process that Dr. Amen talks about in his book called the work that he has people go through. And he does it using 4 questions. The first thing he does is has the person write out the thought that's going on, the thing that's bothering them, the belief that's there. And then they write down, they answer these questions. The first one, is it true? And I'll give you an example of somebody with this in a second. The second one, can I absolutely know that it's true? Then the third question is, how do I react when I believe that thought? And the fourth one is, who would I be without that thought? Or how would I feel if I didn't have the thought? His example that he used is an elderly woman whose husband had died after a long time of marriage. Dr. Amen had her write down the belief that she had. And her belief was, no one would ever want to marry a 75-year-old woman. So that was the thought she worked on. So the question was, is it true? Question number 1. She said, yes, I'm too old to date. Question number 2, can you absolutely know that it's true, that no one would ever want to date a 75-year-old woman? She said, well, no, of course, I can't know that for sure. Then question 3, how do you feel when you have the thought no one would ever want a 75-year-old woman? She said, I feel sad, hopeless, angry at God, and overwhelmed by my loneliness. Question 4, who would you be, or how would you feel if you didn't have the thought no one would ever want to marry a 75-year-old woman? Well, I'd feel much happier, more optimistic. I'd feel like my usual self. Then, the next thing he does is you turn the thought around to the complete opposite to see how that fits. And what she did here, the opposite is, someone will want a 75-year-old woman. And he said, okay, which is truer? She said, I don't know, but if I act like no one will want me, then no one will want me. And then after a time of working through this and seeing herself in the situation differently, she did end up finding somebody, and then they even eventually got married. And so by taking the thought that's bothering you, by running it through this process, then turning it around, it gives you a different perspective, and then these emotional changes actually affect your motivation and affect how you work and which way you go. I'd encourage you to even stop this video here, write something down that's on your mind about a job, about a relationship, about your school, about your goals in general, something that's bothering you, that's holding you up, and work through these questions, and then turn it around and see how it would be different for you. So go ahead and take a few minutes to do that. The last thing I want to cover is about gratitude and appreciation. Choosing to focus on the things that you're grateful for can cause your brain to work better. We've talked about how good emotions release good chemicals, which causes you to feel better, which actually can even reduce inflammation that causes physical issues and so forth. So choosing to think on good things will cause your brain to work better. So an activity I'd like you to do every day for the next 2 weeks is to write down 5 things you're grateful for and record your satisfaction level. You want to write it down because that cements it a lot more than just thinking it in your head. So there's 2 steps to this. First, rate your satisfaction level on a scale of 1 to 10. So you get out your journal and what's my satisfaction level at this moment, or today, or how am I feeling in general right now? How satisfied am I? Where 1 is not satisfied at all, 10 is completely satisfied. So just write that down, just for a record to keep track of things. And then write your list of 5 things. 5 things that you're grateful for right now. And think about those, let them soak in as you're writing them down. Do this for 2 weeks, every day. And at the end of 2 weeks, what I want you to do is kind of look at the scale as it progressed through that time. I'm guessing that your scale will go up over time. As you do this every day, your satisfaction level, even before you write your 5 things for the day, will continue to increase over time. So this is something I'd like you to do. It's not an assignment, but it's an activity that I think would be really helpful if you grab onto and do this. And then in a couple of weeks, see how that's affected you. Put this together with the thoughts that we've had on motivation and see how it affects your life, see how it affects your thoughts and your goals, your plans. And I think as you merge these two together, you'll find yourself moving forward towards what you really want in life. Have a great day.